Okay.
Funny.
All right. Well, it's 7:30 according to the old clock on the wall here. So we'll get going here. So welcome once again to the online version of the RASC Edmonton regular meeting. When we shut down all our in-person activities in March, I held up a bit of hope that we would be meeting in the Ziegler Dome by now, but that is not to be. So we're once again using the webinar format, which allows for the panelists who will be speaking an easier time giving their presentations. And unfortunately, it prevents us from hearing the rest of you as we would in a meeting format, which may be a good thing. No heckling allowed, I guess. If we're still doing online meetings in the fall, we may revisit the format and just go to a regular meeting format, because I do like the interplay between, us talking to one another. So we'll go right into our featured guest. As you can tell from the background, I like Star Trek, and the 33rd rule of acquisition states, it never hurts to suck up to the boss. So our featured speaker is Phil Groff, Executive Director of the RASC. Phil earned his PhD in psychology from the University of Toronto, where he studied human neuropsychology related to problem solving, skill learning, and procedural memory. And he has taught dozens of courses at the undergraduate and graduate level on topics ranging from the history of science and psychology through decision-making, cognitive science, and statistics. He's also a professional magician. Hasn't made the COVID disappear, but one can hope. And he's a member of several international magic organizations, including the Magic Castle in Hollywood. Phil joined the RASC with over 18 years of experience in nonprofit management, spending 8 of those years as a senior executive spearheading organizational change. He's here virtually with us tonight. So without further ado, Phil Groff.
Very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And as I was saying before everybody had gotten into the room, I don't consider this my official visit to Edmonton. I've been telling everybody that I've been doing these virtual meetings for. I did pledge I'd get out to see everybody in person in my first year. Obviously, I'm going to need a bit of an extension on that assignment due to circumstances beyond my control. It's actually funny. I was in between center visits when the lockdown finally hit. I was sitting in a hotel room in Winnipeg, having just finished my center visit there and doing some touring for potential venues for the next GA. And I was supposed to go on to Saskatoon for a center visit that Monday. And then everything went crazy. And I had to fly back to Toronto hurriedly. And it's all been virtual since then. I've become very, very, well, let's say I've got a strong love-hate relationship with Zoom right now. I've been spending a lot of time with it. But anyway, thank you very much for having me, even if it's only in a virtual sense for now. And my plan is just to present a couple of slides, chat a little bit, tell you a couple of things that are going on at national and centrally, and then answer some questions. I mean, the whole point of these center visits was to try and reopen, I think, some of the dialogue that had maybe gotten lost over the years between the national office and the centers, and I think it's a real shame. So. I'm going to start sharing some slides, and let me know if things don't work, but the text should be fairly solid by this point. Like I said, spending a fair amount of time here on Zoom. So, okay. So, you've heard my bio. That was a lot. So I'll just start with some basic slides about the RASC. That for the folks here who've been in the society for a long time, this is all really old news. But there are always some new people at any given meeting, and so it's always worth going over some stuff. And I also think it's nice just to ground, what I'm saying about what we're doing right now in terms of what the strat plan is for the society and how we've been sort of evaluating ourselves over the years. And basically it comes down to this, as I'm sure you're aware, our vision and our mission are really made manifest in these 5 strategic objectives, which is that we try to provide value to the individual members of the society, whether they're affiliated with a center or whether they're an individual who's just at the national level or an international member. And so that's a fair amount of what we do. We also try to provide value to the centers themselves, supporting you guys with what you're doing. I mean, we're using one of the Zoom accounts tonight, that sort of thing, and we try to provide other sorts of resources and such to help with your public outreach events, some infrastructure support, and of course materials and branding and other hopefully increasingly useful communications tools and educational resources as time goes on. Beyond the walls of the RASC, then, there's the value we try to provide to the general public. I mean, we really do want to be Canada's premier organization of both amateur and professional astronomers, recognizing we have more amateurs than professionals now, but at least we're still an organization that has both. And we really want to be a credible voice, whether it's a local news source contacting a local center for opinions on some strange lights some people saw in the sky. We've been getting more and more of those calls, of course, of late since the various satellite clusters have been going up, or whether it's taking a sort of a position on something like the effect of increasing light pollution or the effects of satellite clusters on astronomy. Then there's the value to the scientific community we try to provide, which I'll admit is not our strongest suit in the most recent decades. Ever since Casca, of course, left the society for perfectly good reasons, because they had their own professional needs that really required their own organization. We haven't been as much of a scientific organization, except in terms of amateur citizen scientists. But we do still, for example, publish the only peer-reviewed journal on astronomy in Canada, and we do try to hold good speaker sessions and promote talks and promote scientific literacy wherever we can. And of course, I like to think some of our education and outreach initiatives, particularly some of the stuff that Jenna is doing in the schools with the robotic telescope that I'll tell you about in a few minutes, are maybe hoping to sort of fan the flames of the next generation of people. So if that's true, then we'll at least have been of some value to the scientific community, I hope. Of course, all of this requires us being financially sustainable, and so that's our last measure, is we try to make sure that we're making reasonably good stewardship decisions with the funds that we have. Okay, there's going to be a test on this slide in a few minutes, so you might want to take a few notes. No, but seriously, it's as you all know, we have a complicated organization. There are almost 5,000 members spread across the country and a little bit around the world. That membership is divided up, a lot of it, into 29 local centers, soon to be 30. Our 30th center is coming online within the next couple of weeks. That's the Fraser Valley Astronomers. They've petitioned us for membership, and we've approved their bylaws, and they're about to join the society as center number 30. The centers, of course, have their voice through a national council, which is our committee of centers. And then, of course, the actual legal governance of the organization is through our board of directors, who also serve as liaisons to the standing committees that still perform a lot of the vital functions of the organization. As much as we have an increasing professional staff base to take on a lot of core functions, we're still very much dependent on our volunteers, and so you see the committee structure. It's about to be tweaked a little bit. Robin talked about that a little bit last night in the AGM, for those of you who were part of that. But nothing too serious. Things like we'd like the publishing committee to take a little bit broader view of its role and really become more of an editorial board, trying to sort of manage all of the information flow through our publications. I'll introduce you to the staff, for those of you who don't know them all. You've met me already, hopefully, and I look forward to the day when I can eventually shake your hands. Some of you have undoubtedly over the years talked to Renata, our accounting manager, on the phone. She's really the intellectual memory and institutional memory of the organization. I literally couldn't do my job without her, and so if you haven't talked to Renata, I'm sure you will at some point, because she's the person that helps when things are going amiss. She is ably supported in this by Adela, who is our membership coordinator and administrative assistant in the office. She's the one that deals with our cranky, very aged, malfunctioning computer system, trying to do simple tasks like help you, renew your membership or change your address, stuff that ought to be trivial to do. But because of the age of our infrastructure is not trivial to do anymore. And so Della is the one you often talk to on the phone when, for whatever reason, your credit card keeps getting declined and you have to run it through 3 or 4 times before it finally gets accepted, that sort of thing. Eric probably has been seen the least by most of you up to this point. He's our marketing communications coordinator. He's been around for just under a year now. But a lot of that, of course, was him getting his feet wet, learning the job. And then, of course, he had a bit of a debilitating car crash just before Christmas that put him out for a couple of months, and has just been getting back to work, and is recovered wonderfully, and is back at full steam. And his marketing communications committee is coming online. Even as we speak. They've been doing some good work. Jenna has been a little bit more of a public face recently. She's sort of humorously here called our youth outreach coordinator, although as you can tell, she does a lot more than youth outreach these days. So she's really our education and outreach person in the society. We also have various contractors. We've got a fabulous fundraiser in Lisa DeVito. We have some unpaid help, such as Randall Rosenfeld, who's our society archivist and historian. And of course, we take on student support in the summer, that sort of thing as well. So that's the structure of the organization. Now let's talk about the numbers behind it. Off to the left here, we're just going to talk about the revenue first, and then we'll talk about the expense side. We see the year end for 2019. These are the audited numbers that you saw in the annual report and that were in the presentation last night from the treasurer. You can see our year end versus our budget for 2019. Our revenue was up over what we had budgeted for last year. Our expenses, however, were also up over what we budgeted for last year, and partly that had to do with us having to, for example, as a national office, take on the GA, which had not been originally part of our plans. But if you look at the numbers here, and I'll draw your attention to the budget more in a moment. If you look at the numbers here, you'll see that our funds really come from 3 big pools of money. So a little under a third of our money comes from membership fees. A little bit more than a third of our money, $250,000 a year, comes from our publications, and another third of our money comes from sort of donations and grants, and then other smaller miscellaneous sources. Last year, we had a tremendous windfall for the society in terms of how well our investments did for us. The economy was very strong, as you know, last year. And against our predicted $24,000 of interest we were supposed to make on our investments, we actually got $62,000, which helped soften the blow a little bit from the loss we took from our Sky News investment last year. And I just wanted to point out a little bit to put that in a bit of context. It's true that last year Sky News lost $64,000, but that's very early in 2019. Sky News runs on a fiscal year of April to March, whereas the Society runs on a January to December calendar year. And so whatever number we realize for our investment in Sky News, it's at the end of their year, which is, of course, March, in this case, March of 2019. And in March of 2019, Sky News was in pretty bad shape. Fortunately, from March to December of 2019, we took a lot of steps to turn the ship around with Sky News. And I'm pleased to say that as of March of 2020, now these are not audited numbers for Sky News yet. We're just bringing in the auditor right now, in fact, to do Sky News audit. But as of March 2020, Sky News has flipped almost $100,000, going from very in the red to quite in the black, and it's now a profitable magazine once again, and a positive contributor to the RASC's investments. So that's thanks to Paula Blacklock, the publishing consultant that we hired to help us restructure the magazine, some new staff hires we made, some changes we made to things like the printers and some of the other infrastructure that needed to be shaken up a bit, and as a result, we've managed to turn that around. So here's the budget that I quite confidently drew up with the treasurer and Renata and the board and approved at our early 2020 board meetings. And you can see the numbers there are quite solid and a little up from last year. I made a very modest estimate of how our investments were going to do compared to how they did last year. I thought they'd do a little bit better than we projected for last year, but I wasn't assuming they'd do nearly as well as they did last year. And I assumed, if nothing else, we could count Sky News as a break even for 2020. It's actually, as I said, doing better than break even. This is all well and good, but as I'll point out in a moment, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. And in this case, the enemy was COVID-19. And so we've taken some hits on some of these line items, and in particular, our investments, like every investment in the world to date, has tumbled tremendously as a result of things like that. And of course, we have some problems with membership, some with renewals, but more with the ability to recruit new members when we're not holding live events and star parties and such, which of course is our main tool as a society for bringing new people in. Turning to the expense side of things from last year, you can see again the numbers that were presented in the AGM and in our annual report for 2019, and you can see how we performed against our budget. You can see the 2020 budget, and the story really to take home from this is, whereas our funds come in from three main sources, our expenses are sort of four main sources, four main cost centers. There's member services, there's publications, there's programming, and in particular, you see it's public/center outreach as the top line of programming there, and that's really a lot of support we provide to centers for the outreach programs that the centers run. And then there's national operations. So those are the four main things that money is spent on in the society. And if you look at our comparison for our budget for 2020 to 2020 revenue, you see that we were predicting, a modest surplus for this year. So after having had a couple of years of deficit financing for the organization, planned deficits, I'll point out, we did have a deficit last year realized of 117,000, but that was a planned deficit of 120. So we actually held ourselves a little bit tighter than we'd hoped to. We were projecting a year in the black this year quite confidently, and unfortunately, as I say, the world had different plans, and the jury is still out on how this is all going to shake out in another couple of months' time. All I can say is we're doing everything we can to control costs and everything we can to generate what revenue we can from new and existing sources. And of course, we've been very grateful to the generosity of our members who've been stepping forward to help out with an emergency fund to help us help members who are having financial difficulty because of the COVID crisis and are unable to renew their membership, so that we can offer them a bursary. And when the year is all said and done, whatever is left from that fund will of course go to help offset any other deficits in our income that we're suddenly facing as a result of the COVID crisis. So those are the numbers to date, and our budget for 2020, and that's kind of the overview I wanted to give of that. I can take questions now, or I can just keep going and we can take questions. Why don't I just take questions at the end of it might be easiest that way. I get through all the slides and I can bring anything back up that anyone wants to talk about. Okay. So if you were at the AGM last night, you heard me talk a little bit about the task that I was set when I first joined the organization back in October, which was to take a look at the structure of the organization, talk to people who've been around for a while, look at the books, look at the minutes of various meetings, look at the way things were operating, and figure out what I saw as sort of the greatest challenges facing the Royal Astronomical Society as we were transitioning from 2019 to 2020. And as you may have heard me say, if you've heard me speak to this before, your challenges are both unfortunately and fortunately exactly the same as every other membership-based association's challenges. And I mean every other membership-based association. Then the American Bar Association is hemorrhaging members right now. There are more lawyers than ever in the US, but the American Bar Association is hemorrhaging members. So that just gives you an idea of what every membership-based organization is dealing with. And it has to do with everything from increasing time pressures on people as our society has been evolving over recent decades to a just-in-time economy, and going from shorter to longer work weeks and such. It's as you can imagine. There's a joke I heard an analyst make a little while ago, which I think is quite appropriate to the time issue, it took us 400 years to negotiate our way down to a 40-hour work week, and less than 10 years for smartphones to obliterate that. You know, so value expectations, people have changing views of what it means to invest in an organization, to be part of an organization. The market is changing, both in terms of the demographics and also in terms of just what kind of competition is out there for people's leisure time, leisure dollars, intellectual stimulation time and dollars. So we're in a changing landscape. There are generational differences about what it means to join or be a member of something, or what it means to be part of something for a long period of time. There's a lot more competition out there for everything, right? There is so much information overload available to people from so many different channels all the time that it's hard to get even a few seconds of someone's attention sometimes. That it's astonishing that anything that's 153 years old is able to sustain itself. And then there's technology changes, right? Just look at the fact that our society right now is so incredibly dependent on technology that wasn't even in existence 10 years ago. These meetings that we're holding right now would have been much clunkier a generation ago in computer technology, and I think we'd have had a much less successful go at surviving the programming challenges of the COVID crisis if we didn't have, for example, Zoom available to us. Fortunately, there are solutions to all of those challenges that the organizations that have been surviving and thriving in recent years have adopted, and we can go to school on what they've been doing and learn from those examples. And really, they come down to 5 major ways of changing business for any membership-based association or organization. They're things that were already underway at the RASC to some extent or another. So in some cases, I'm simply just having to build on the strengths that were already there. And in other cases, there are places where you just needed another little incremental jump forward. So overhauling the governance model and committee operations, of course, RASC well underway with that. Going from a large advisory body down to a competency-based board of directors for the main governance body of an organization. It's of course a legal requirement under the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, but of course, even without that legal requirement, it's also best practice. And the organizations that have tried to keep larger and larger decision-making bodies have been foundering. Change of committee operations so that committees are focused on the core businesses they need to be focused on, and that they have the right talent on them, and that often that means getting a staff person in there to really help support with whatever the committee is trying to accomplish, so that there's somebody who's accountable. I mean, the strength of the RASC has always been its enormous committed volunteer base. That's also a weakness because, of course, volunteers get tired, volunteers get burned out. And ultimately, volunteers aren't as accountable as a paid staff person is for something. If Jenna wasn't doing her job, which of course Jenna's doing like 2 people's jobs, but if Jenna wasn't doing her job, I can fire Jenna. If a well-meaning volunteer who's been running a committee for 15 years, you don't really have that recourse with. And so it's trying to find the ways to overhaul those models to make sure that the volunteer structures we have are providing the guidance, the oversight, the incredible breadth of organizational knowledge that they can, and then there's an engine to drive things forward that's powered by staff power. And that's really what the next bullet point is here about empowering me, empowering the staff to make sure that we've got the tools that we have and the skills that we have, and that we're hiring the right people in the right positions. So that we can be supporting this massive enterprise that is this 5,000 member organization. In terms of our membership challenges, it's about constantly redefining what the member market is, taking a look at who are we recruiting, who could we be recruiting, who are we losing year over year. This is an organization, as I say, of nearly 5,000 members. We always used to just say 5,000, but the reality is 2019 was the first year where there was actually a net decline over 2018, over previous years. And as a result, we're now a little under 5,000 members. Every year, the society, however, recruits hundreds of new members, and in some cases, as many as 800 or 900 new members in a year. The bad news is we tend to lose almost exactly as many members as we recruit. So it's about trying to retain the members that we have, making sure we're meeting the needs of the people that we've got, because a member who's already signed up once is your best customer, right? You shouldn't have to invest too much more to convince them to stay with you if you've been making them feel welcome, making them feel that this is, you know, the place where they're getting what they originally came for from. And then, of course, we have to rationalize programs and services to make sure you're continuing to meet the needs of the members and of the public and of the centers and all the people we're trying to serve. And of course, doing that as nimbly and adaptively as we can, right? I mean, the fact that we've had to move to a lot of online programming in the last couple of months just to keep meetings happening and keep speaker content happening, astronomy content happening, has been a tremendous learning experience for us, and something that we're going to take forward post-COVID, recognizing that there was a real hunger for some, you know, online courses and some skill building things that we can be providing to the centers. I even see that there's a question in the Q&A that I'll probably just talk to right now, and we can come back to it later during the Q&A session as well, which is, has consideration been given to providing governance training for councils? Absolutely. I mean, we recognize that skill building at all levels is probably something that's would be appreciated. And so that's very much something that we're looking at, is governance training for councils that want and need it, like not forcing it upon anybody, but trying to help everybody sort of, you know, get to a sort of at least a common standard, so that we can all be, you know, pulling oars in the same direction, as it were. And then all of this requires robust technology. As I mentioned, our aging INUS technology, it really is dying. That the computer system we have right now, it produces monsters in terms of the dozens and dozens of tickets for failure to serve our members we get every single day. Every day, dozens of tickets coming in of, this went wrong today when I tried to renew. This went wrong today when I tried to sort of change my address. This went. You can only see those things, you know, day in, day out for so long before you realize, okay, the machine has to go. We need a better machine. Add that to the fact that for the last couple of years, Dave Lane has been patiently nursing an aging and dying listserv infrastructure for the society that really is on its last legs. The fact that he's kept the server going, like, we were convinced, he was convinced that by the end of November, there was no way the listservs could keep running. And he's managed to keep them going this far, but they will be dying shortly. Fortunately, help is on the way. We've got a new piece of technology. We're going to be installing a new infrastructure to run our membership database, to run the secure side of the RASC website, so it'll handle all our online shopping, all of our membership, subscription permissions for things like who has what access to the robotic telescope. It'll take care of all of that for us very seamlessly, minimal effort required. I know it sounds too good to be true, and of course it is a big complex piece of technology, so there will be a learning curve, and there will be some things that'll have to be done to make it work. But it is something that's going to make the society better and stronger. And one of the things it's going to do is replace our listservs as well with a new communication bridge that will allow us to set up discussion groups or listservs for every committee, every center, every other grouping of individuals that for whatever reason wants to, on an ad hoc basis. We can do that and effortlessly give people access to the right communication channels at the right time, and it'll be easy to sign up for, easy to maintain your membership in, easy to switch things around. The new system is going to make it so much easier for the centers, for example, to do things. When the centers hold an election and you have a new treasurer, it will literally be as simple as us moving the treasurer label off of this membership record and plopping it over onto that membership record, and now that person has all of the permissions and accesses that the old person did. It's going to be a much better system going forward. So that's at least one really great piece of news I can say, and we're over halfway through the process of getting the new system built and installed. I'm estimating 2 months from now for a final launch date, but as I said, big piece of technology. And of course, the world keeps shifting under me. It's been an interesting 8 months since I've been in this society. A lot of stuff has happened in a short period of time. And so I'm not confident making too strong a prediction about anything anymore, but I'd say we're still likely on good track to be rolling this out in about 2 months' time. Most of you know the people in the picture here. This is our board of directors up until last night. Of course, I don't have a new photograph, but I wanted to show you some pictures from a board retreat we held on March 7th and 8th that weekend. And of course, it was literally just before the lockdown took place. So this was one of the last public meetings we had. We didn't know it was going to be one of the last public meetings we'd have at the time. You can see the group of us here in our boardroom / archives / telescope museum, which is one of the rooms we have for our office space that we're going to have to move out of, unfortunately, sometime in the next year because the building has been sold and is going to be redeveloped into a seniors residence. But for now, we've got these 2 rooms, one suite of rooms, and then this large room here that we use as a multi-purpose thing. Most of you know a lot of these people, some of you don't. So just to let you know, we've got Michael Watson here, who's our legal counsel and now our brand new second VP. Colin Haig, of course, left the board as of last night, but he's a former past president and has been serving the board and in various governance roles in the society for about a decade now. Our new first VP, former second VP, Charles Ennis. Hopefully I need no introduction anymore at this point. Our treasurer is Catherine Carr. Our outgoing president, as of yesterday, is of course Chris, who again many of you know. You've seen his postings recently, and if you were on the AGM yesterday, you saw him chairing. Our new incoming chair and president, our old first VP, is Robin Foray. And our secretary is Eric Briggs from Toronto. Unfortunately, I don't have in the photo here. I should have tried to splice in a picture of our newest board member, who's Brendan Roy, who's joining us from the Thunder Bay Center. And here are just a couple of shots from the retreat I was telling you about, just to show people a bit in action. It also lets me introduce some of the staff and contractors here. That's Lisa, the fundraiser I was telling you about. That's Renata, you can see standing over there, trying to figure out what it is that Colin is doing. That is Jenna Hines' smiling face here. And in profile, almost edging out of the photo here, you can see Alendria Brunes, the new managing editor for Sky News Magazine. Turning the camera almost 180 degrees to shoot down the other side of the table here, you can see some of the board members. You can see this is Eric Wickham, who's our marketing communications guy. At the point of this meeting, he was still wearing an eye patch because he was still having some blurred vision problems after his car crash, but now that's fortunately resolved. And with him, of course, is Randall Rosenfeld, who many of you know. And just to give you an idea of her energy and industry, which still astonishes me, somehow Jenna has managed to be in this picture as well, even though literally the camera was just like taken here. So I'm not exactly certain how she managed to be on both sides of the room at once, but it doesn't actually surprise me. Here's an example of some of the stuff that we've been doing of late since COVID, just some of the new programming that we've had out there. We've had our Insider's Guide to the Galaxy sessions, which have been happening Tuesdays. We had a very successful course for members only on how to use the Observer's Handbook, because we recognize that for many people, especially newer, younger members, or just people who've been around for a long time and never really thought to crack open that massive tome that they receive every year, it would be a great opportunity to have the actual content experts, namely the folks who are the contributing editors to each of the sections of the Observer's Handbook, take the members through and really explain what that section is supposed to do, how to read it, how to get the most value out of it. So we really think we had a great session there. You may have seen it. It literally finished just a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and Alistair Ling here was our guest presenter on that last session of the Observer's Handbook session. We've been hosting self-isolation star parties on alternate Wednesday evenings. And of course, we've had a speaker series going a couple of times a month since we've been off with COVID. All of this we took a break from for early June so that the GA, virtual GA could take place. And so those of us who were involved with the AGM and other things could have a chance to do that. And also so I could give Jenna some much needed rest, send her off to go to Manitoulin Island and do some kayaking and rock climbing and clear out her head a bit so that she could come back refreshed and renewed, because we've got exciting new programs starting up by the end of June. Replacing the How to Use the Observer's Handbook program will be a new program that we're starting, which really focuses on this, the Explore the Universe guide. And we're going to try and take as many people as possible through the Explore the Universe program over the next 8 to 12 weeks. And so we'll see if we can get a whole crop of new people with observing certificates, or at the very least, some decent observing experience, yours truly included, because, I did some observing in my youth when I was more of a science enthusiast and such than I've been in recent years. So I'm very much looking forward to getting out there with my new scope and my binoculars and just being able to work my way through this program as well. So that's one thing we're doing. The other thing we're doing is we're restarting the special speakers series, only this time with a twist for the next couple of months. We're going to be focusing on the best and the brightest from each of the centers. So it's going to be a chance for the centers to showcase their own speakers. And so that's something that we are very much looking forward to doing. And we've got the first couple of people already lined up for that. So stay tuned for more information about what's happening with our online programming. And the question, I've got a question in here, which is, are these courses still available to be seen anywhere? All of these courses are still available on our YouTube channel and will remain there. The Observer's Handbook course you can get to on our RASC website by signing in by logging in as a member, because it was a members only benefit initially for the Observer's Handbook course. But everything else available on our YouTube channel. You can check them out right now. And is there an estimate available to resume public outreach? Specifically, is there any chance of RASC Edmonton participating in the Jasper Dark Sky Festival in October, which has not yet been canceled? Is there any chance? Yes, there's any chance. It's a mug's game at this point, trying to make predictions about what's going to happen with the pandemic. I'm still in one of the cities here in the country that's still under kind of phase 1 of lockdown. So we only have a couple of things open here in Toronto. Some of the rest of the province is going to be experimenting with some additional openings and some additional services becoming available again, but not where I am. So I don't know what's going to happen with Jasper. What's going to happen with? On the one hand, the one thing we know is that outdoor events, we're told by the experts, are probably the lowest risk sorts of events that there are. But having said that, if it's an event where you're sharing scopes, if you're sharing surfaces, you're not going to want to be disinfecting your eyepieces after each use, things like that. It's again a challenge, right? So all I can say is, we're going to be following along as closely as possible the best recommendations for what's coming down nationally from public health, and what's coming down in the various jurisdictions across the country from public health, and we'll make the best recommendations and accommodations that we can as time progresses. I hope that you can go to the Jasper Dark Sky Festival in October, but I know that there are people already canceling large conferences for next spring. So.
If I could just jump in for a minute, Marion, we did talk about that at our last council meeting, and the simple answer is we don't know. It's really Jasper Tourism's call whether they're going to go ahead with it or not. If the U.S. border still has the 14-day quarantine to bring people across, I can't see it happening. You never know. We'll know. I'm sure we'll know by the end of by the time we meet in September.
Absolutely.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll be keeping our eyes on this, and we're watching the news very closely all the time, just to give the best possible advice we can. But things change rapidly. I was at remember I was literally in a hotel room about to fly to another members meeting when all of a sudden it was like, no more meetings. I was like, oh, okay, got to fly back to Toronto. So The situation was mercurial then. It will probably be mercurial still in the fall, so we'll keep an eye on that. Just showing you a couple of little tidbits. I just wanted to give you some tastes from some other programs that we're still working at. You heard, if you were at the AGM last night, about the Dorner Telescope Museum and the wonderful work we've been doing with that very generous donation from Rudolf Dorner. For those who don't know, he's a member of the KW Center who is making a large bequest as part of his estate planning to us to be able to sort of fill and run a telescope museum. But in the interim, because fortunately he's still healthy and with us, he has been giving us annual gifts every year to allow us to begin to acquire some materials for the museum. And you can see the glee-filled face of our museum curator there, Randall Rosenfeld, as he contemplates some of the treasures we've been picking up lately. In fact, I went with Randall on a great road trip with Randall and Jenna, in fact, to Montreal back in the before time when there was such a thing as a road trip and traveling in a car with people that weren't part of your immediate family. We went to Montreal and other parts of the eastern townships to a couple of telescope manufacturers there to pick up a few things. You'll see what we have right here is a beautiful Dobsonian wooden reflector that Norman Fulham made. It's a beautiful piece of art, but also a fully functional, excellent instrument as well. And then we have some other examples of pieces that have been crafted. This, for example, is a pair of replicas here of the 1609, 1610 Galilean telescopes. Complete with the display stand they are usually pictured with, in fact, sometimes erroneously pictured with in history of astronomy books, where you see pictures of Galileo trying to look through the telescopes while they're on that stand. Of course, the stand didn't exist during his lifetime, and was how they were displayed later by the court, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so we've got replicas, we've got real scopes. You can see some in the background here, some member donated older scopes that are going to be part of the museum. Here is a beautiful beast, that enormous thing that is taking up way too much floor space in my boardroom right now. That is a 10-inch f10 telescope from 1920. Sorry, 12-inch, my mistake, f8. So I should have just read my slide before I spoke. It's a 12-inch f8, but in either case, it's about 100 inches long, right? It's huge, and it's a giant beast. We can't actually mount it on its stand because there isn't enough ceiling space for the height that it would be if we mounted it. But we do want to eventually be able to give it a proper home and have it displayed properly, because that's a piece of RASC's history from the mid-1920s, and we have a lot of other great things like that. Talking about the Telescope Museum, I wanted to just show you this little video of our trip to see Norman Fulham and let him speak for a few minutes for himself, for those of you who haven't met him before. Brilliant, interesting, quirky individual.
It's just a matter of wanting to do something. It's not, nobody forced it on me. So, yeah, it was my trademark. At one point, my business card was The Man in the Moon, and I said, let's do a solar eclipse or a moon eclipse. Well, I'm Normand Fulham. I'm from Pointe-aux-Trembles, the east side of Montreal, east end of Montreal. People starting to ask me to make the mirror small, 8, 6, 10, 12 inches. And at one point I said, well, should be fun maybe to do just for a living. After 2 years, I felt comfy. My wife, were you comfy, chérie, when I left my job? So this side of the shop is all optic. Grinding, polishing, figuring from 6 inches up to 50 inches in diameters. All the machine that you see are homemade, that I build all my machinery. All the testing system, all the manipulating, sucking cup to move the mirror around. So now the other side is more mechanical, assembling. Well, the oven is there, and this is the kiln, my pizza oven. So inside you got elements on the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. So it's all computer controlled. So on this side here, this is my vacuum chamber to do the coating. Homemade again. Yeah. Because I couldn't afford to buy one. So it took about a year to build.
took the air out of it. Were you scared?
Oh yeah. One day I said, I got to build my own guitar one day. And then 3-4 years ago I said, well, let's try it. So I built my first guitar, the only guitar I built. I play in open mics and everything. People go nuts about the sounds. Oh wow, what kind of guitar is that? Well, I built it. You want to make me one? I said, no. It's a very good sound guitar. My dream project? Oh boy. That would be to have a place in the Rockies for my wife's horses and my observatories with a big 50-inch in there. And that's my compressor.
So yeah, remarkable individual. You caught the line in there about how every piece of equipment in there he handmade, like all of those tools, all of that technology, and of course he has his own proprietary method of making those giant mirrors with the sandwiches of glass with the little glass pillars in between them that allow them to cool much easier. But of course he had to work out the tolerances and such of how to get 2 sheets of glass and intervening pillars all to heat and bend at the right degree with each other, and he, all self-taught, all self-built. Just wanted to show you some examples here of Sky News. The newest one should be coming to your mailbox before too long, so keep an eye out for that. I think one of the best things I've done since being at the RASC was helping to hire Alendria Brunes. She's really just an amazing journalist and has a great visual eye and a great ear for language, and I think is taking Sky News in new directions while retaining a love of the past, and is I think going to be interesting to watch as the magazine evolves with her over the next couple of years. And I think the last project I just thought I'd talk a little bit about was our robotic telescope project, because it's almost ready to go. And so I'm trying to get people a little bit excited about it. If you were part of the webinar that was done on the robotic telescope project a couple of months ago by Jenna, you'll know that she stepped up as a staff member to sort of shepherd this project to completion, and has been doing so even while we've been in isolation. So the scope, for those of you who don't know, is on the border of Nevada, in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. It's at the Sierra Remote Observatories, and we are in shed number 9, which is right here, with the roof retracted. I believe that's actually our scope right there. But anyway, the structure we've worked out for the scope, and if you were at the AGM last night, you saw the team leads for the various teams. We've got an astrophotography team and a science team, and then we've got the operations team and an outreach team, as well as just some IT infrastructure folks as well. The idea is members are going to be able to sign up at one of 3 tiers to use the telescope. There are going to be folks who really just want access to all the data, access to the photos, want to process their own pictures, that sort of thing. And for them, we've got this simple data user tier where you'll be able to subscribe. And for your subscription, you'll get all the data produced by all the teams over the course of the year, free to use as you wish. And also have access to the forums for both the astrophotography team and the science team, and all their expertise with us and how to work with the data, and of course all the tools. We already have some online training webinars and such on how to work with the data, and there will be even more rolling out with the actual launch of the program. For those who want to be a bit more in the driver's seat and would like some of the keys to the kingdom, there's going to be an opportunity to pay a little higher subscription, at which point you get to become a team member of either the astrophotography team or the science team, which means you get to help set the policies for the scope about what the targets are going to be and what work is going to be done over the course of the year. You also get to learn how to program the scope and how to process the raw data coming out of it. You'll have access to all of the first access to all of the data, access to all the forums, as well as a private team forum that only the members of the teams will have. And as I say, you'll be the guys deciding what the scope is actually pointing at on any given evening. We also decided to set aside a little bit of time, maybe one night a week, seeing what kind of appetite there is for it, for the folks who would actually like solo scope time. They want to just buy a couple of hours to themselves on the scope. This is the one way in which you can get proprietary data from the scope, because if you buy a couple of hours of scope time and point it at the targets of your choice, that data is now yours and yours alone. And that's the only data that we won't be sharing with all the people who are otherwise subscribers to the scope data. Just to be clear, even for the folks who are buying me by the hour, we're not simply giving you the keys to the Cadillac and letting you drive it however you want, because it's really easy to break this very expensive scope. We've already had a couple of near runs as people have been getting trained up and learning how to use the system. And we don't want the scope banging into the wall of the shed, or accidentally pointing at the full moon, or worse, at the setting sun or something like that, and burning out components. So there will always be someone working with you. You get to still decide what the scope does. You get to make your choices, but there'll be someone there to say, okay, we can't actually shoot at the target you want tonight because there's a full moon that's very close to the target that you want to shoot for much of the evening, and so you're not going to be able to get a really good image of it. We could either rebook your time for later in the month, say, when we have a better chance of shooting it, or could I suggest some alternate targets to you, or do you have some other alternate targets you'd be interested in? So someone who will help take you through the process, and then help with the actual programming of the scope's instructions and such, to make sure that you actually get what you wanted out of the situation. I thought I'd tease you with just some lovely photos that our members have processed from data that's come out of here. So you can see beautiful picture here that Doug McDonald processed from the North American Nebula, the Cygnus Wall portion there. Dan Meeks worked with this lovely part of the Horsehead Nebula here. And since we had that webinar, we have been regularly releasing little pockets of data out to the membership as a whole, just to kind of whet people's appetite. And in fact, later in the summer, just before the actual launch of the project, we are going to have a contest where we're going to launch a packet of photographic data out to the membership, and whoever does the most interesting or best processing of that will win a prize. We haven't worked out what that prize is going to be yet. We're probably going to do it in concert with Sky News Magazine, so at the very least you'll get some bragging rights and probably get your photo published amongst other things, but there will be some other you'll probably get like a year's worth of scope data or something like that as a prize as well. Why are we not letting you do this right now while we're all stuck at home? We'd love to. There's just one little hiccup, and that is we can't actually charge you for time on the scope and have the proper permissions relayed to the telescope website, etc., that would allow different people to get different access, etc., with our current IMIS infrastructure. So once again, our old creaky technology is betraying us. And so this will be like the first thing we launch once we've got the new infrastructure in place. I promise you, I want to get it up there and running. We are certainly going to be pushing this as quickly as we can. But in the meantime, like I said, we're going to have that contest happening later this summer, so look forward to it. And here you can see some examples of 3 different members who played with the same data here of the Dumbbell Nebula. I'm not sure why Stevens is flipped, or whether Stevens is right and the other 2 are flipped. I'll leave it to you guys to tell that to me. But we've got these three images here. Question here: are you aware of any opportunities to obtain operational funding that would allow centers themselves to hire a paid staff person? This would take away the risk of relying on volunteers and increase the scope of center operations. Maybe I'll come back to that in the Q&A session. But what I will say is, Lisa DeVito is our fundraiser, and by when I say our, I mean our. And we've made it very clear that she has time available to help centers as well, and already has helped some centers with some local fundraising and such to try and accomplish some goals that a center. We had a center come to us with a great plan for the Special Projects Fund, but it was way more money than we could give out of the Special Projects Fund for the project they had in mind. So Lisa was working with them to help find some other local sources to help fund that project. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, I think it would be great if more of the centers, especially larger centers and more established centers, could have at least some part-time staff support to enable them to to work more efficiently. Jenna would kill me if I showed all the scope stuff, but didn't show some of the science work that she's doing with her students as part of the outreach program with the telescope. This is an example, and people who saw Sarah Seeger's talk yesterday know what these curves are. These are, of course, curves that you see as you watch for the transits of exoplanets across stars that you're observing. And these are examples of data that were collected by high school students as part of a class project with Jenna giving them some initial instruction and support. Can you imagine, like, I cannot fathom having, back when I was in high school, having said, oh, what did you do for your class project? Oh, I found an exoplanet. Wow. So hopefully this kind of work is going to sow the seeds of some future generations of folks interested in the night sky. And maybe they'll become, just amateur, members of our society, or maybe this will be the next team lead on a big space telescope somewhere down the road. But I'm delighted to see this kind of work being done with our scope as well. And there will always be time reserved on the scope, at least one night a week, for outreach work with kids and such, and some other projects we're trying to work out for using the scope in those contexts, and that's all paid for by grant money. None of that comes out of the subscribers or the membership. Anyway, so these are the prices we had for the various scope things when it's available. To be a basic data user and just get all the data for a year, that'll be $100, $50 for youth members. To be a team member is $300 a year, $150 for youth members again. If you want an hour of scope time, we're thinking $75 an hour. For now, and this is the important thing, we're only making this available to RASC members. This is a RASC member benefit to be able to use our scope. And the goal here is just to break even. We just want the scope to sustain itself. Up till now, it's been supported by the generosity of people donating to the telescope fund. We'd like it to be able to pay its own way. And and based on the business case we've built and some very conservative estimates we have of how many folks are likely to take us up on our offer here, it will pay for itself. So as we wrap up here my portion of this online virtual meeting, I thought I'd throw out here an XKCD cartoon to remind us of the joys of in-person star parties and astronomy meetings.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Phil. That was great.
Thank you very much for having me.
And,
happy to answer questions.
We had a question fairly early on, and I kind of wondered that myself. It was one of your first slides. How did RASC manage $62,000 of investment income?
I wish I could take any kind of credit for that. I wish I could tell you I understood the voodoo that goes into it, but what you need to know is we have a pretty decent set of investments right now, $200,000 sitting in the bank from when we sold our last residence. We had a building on DuPont Street in Toronto where the RASC was housed for many years, and when we sold that, we banked the money that we got from the sale, and so that's where those investment dollars are coming from. We've invested that money with Scotia McLeod, and we have. There's other money that we put into those investment funds every year. So, for example, when people give to the Northcutt Educational Fund or the Sawyer Hague Fund, those sorts of things, we put those funds into investment until we're ready to disperse them for speakers and things like that. So, we try to make sure that we're getting the best return we can on money that's been given to us like that.
Okay. And let's see here, what do we got?
Oh, and I'll just also say, those are also the funds that we tap into when we have a planned a deficit, as in the last couple of years where we were trying to restructure a couple of things and we had a few planned deficit budgets. This year, of course, we have a planned break-even budget, but the universe had a different plan, and we may well have to be going back to our sort of investment funds to make up some shortfall. Hopefully not, and we're trying to avoid that as best we can.
Okay. And this question from Tom, which I think you've seen, are you aware of any opportunities to obtain operational funding? Yeah.
Yeah, so again, am I aware personally off the top of my head? No, but I absolutely, it's something we would love to investigate with you, because as I said, Lisa is very committed to helping centers find funding for center projects, as well as the national office finding funds for national projects. I remember the XKCD card too. We can all see each other again.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Let's wait here. I guess not.
Not
So
seeing
I
any.
will put up the. Okay.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you for having me, and I pledge I will get out to you in person when I'm allowed to.
Okay, great.
So,
Well, hang around for a while and.
Will do.
Okay, Mike, you want to do the minutes?
Yes, the last meeting was held on May 11th, and that particular evening was a members' night with speakers Doug Hube and Alistair Ling and Bruce McCurdy. And the minutes of that meeting have been posted on the OneDrive, and there have been no errors or omissions communicated to me. So I shall move to accept the minutes as posted.
Okay, if we can have a second, or someone can just raise their hand, and I will
Alistair.
see. Alistair will raise his hand. Okay. Do we have any objections? Because we can't all say aye. Is there anyone who objects to anything in the minutes? Type now or forever hold your peace. Okay, seeing none, I will consider that carried. Warren, you want to do the BNLO report from you look like you're in the BNLO.
Yeah, that's where I am. You bet. On site. How's the sound here?
It's good.
Okay, good. Yeah, let me just share my screen then. I'll bring up some slides. Let's go. There it is. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I wanted to give an update on BNLO, Black Market Lake Observatory. It's been a while. I guess Luca gave an update in January, so it's been, I guess, almost 6 months, and it was time. So some of you I know may not know a lot about the Black Market Lake Observatory project. So I just wanted to give a one-slide, very brief recap on the project. So the project actually began in about 2000, I think it was 2004, presentation to the Edmonton RASC Council, and that was the start of the project when that idea was approved by council. So it took a long time to clear the land and have it graded and graveled, things like that, and it's sat kind of just as an observing site for a long time. But in 2016, we got a real shot in the arm that really kickstarted the current project and where we're at now. So Bob Drew, many of you may remember, was an Edmonton RASC member, now retired to Victoria, and he's out there active in Victoria RASC. But when he moved, he left his 32-inch f4 Barry Arnold mirror here and decided to donate it to the Edmonton Center. And to purchase that mirror new at the time would have been about $125,000. So it was a very generous donation. And that really coalesced then the current project around that mirror. So shortly thereafter, the Black Market Lake Observatory Committee charged Roman with beginning construction of a telescope to contain that 32-inch mirror. And the actual construction, breaking ground on site of the new observatory began in August 2018 when we poured the foundations. We hired some concrete contractors to pour the foundations. Everything else has been volunteers from the Black Market Lake Observatory Committee and assorted other people. You can see up here at the top a little picture of Roman with the in his shop working on the mount back, this is probably a couple of years ago now. But in early stages, you can see the fork mount and the azimuth base mount there. You can see how big this mount is to hold this large mirror. You can see the concrete grade beam here, and then the pier that the telescope will get bolted onto. I'll show you some more details on this later, some CAD drawings. You can see here us out at Black Nugget Lake actually working on building the walls to the observatory that sit on top of the concrete grade beam. I think that's Mike Zilowicki sitting up on top there. And so the committee worked hard through the fall of 2018 into 2019, and in July 2019, with 1 day left on our building permit, we passed the final building inspection. You can see a picture down at bottom right, the stairs going up into the observatory with basically the outside pretty much finished, which allowed us to get the building permit. Since then, so over the winter, we've continued the work. In January and February, we got Roman stressed us out a lot because he found some real serious problems with his azimuth bearing. I think he lost a few hairs. I know I lost a few nights sleep on wondering what the heck we were going to do. Roman finally discovered, though, that it was a manufacturer error. So the bearing manufacturer had screwed up, and it wasn't Roman's error or anything like that. They fortunately agreed to replace the bearing at no charge, and Roman lost a couple months' time dealing with that issue, but fortunately it's had a good outcome. The rest of the committee worked hard on the inside of the observatory, finishing up the inside of the observatory. You can see Luca here painting some of the interior panels. This is inside Jerry Shilby's garage. He has a nice heated garage that he let us work in. So we painted up the panels inside there in February, took it out on site. You can see Jerry shoveling some snow, Luca behind them. I think they're shoveling a pathway into the observatory. And you can see us doing some finishing work. This is Kent cutting some holes in some of the paneling for some of the electrical outlets. So the color here you see is this nice gray. It's called actually sold as a mission control as the color of the gray, which seems kind of appropriate there. But then, of course, the pandemic arrived in March, and Black Nugget Lake is actually run by Beaver County, but it's leased from Alberta government by Beaver County. And Beaver County decided to follow Alberta provincial park regulations, so they shut the whole park down. Fortunately, we were granted essential maintenance and work access, so we were allowed to keep working on site. And we did do that, in fact, and you can see here a photo down here. We were able to complete the installation of the paneling inside. You can see Luca sitting here after a hard day's work. I think on this day we did a lot of tasks. One thing we did was Kent cut a hole here in the flooring for where the scope will get dropped through and bolted down. You can see the pier just below there on the floor. And of course, having to wear this PPE inside the building was a lot of fun, as you can imagine, but it was required because of COVID restrictions. So the park was actually remained closed until June 1st, but we were allowed in, as I said, to keep working, and we did do quite a bit of work. The observatory now, the building itself is getting very close to being finished inside. You can see a nice photo here, which is my background. You can see the inside painted nicely. Luca and Catherine went out and painted the floors a few weeks ago. A team of volunteers, it was basically the committee plus our spouses, came out, and we spread about 10 cubic yards of washed rock around the grounds. So we've landscaped the grounds, and things are really progressed nicely with the observatory. And this is a picture that I shot a couple of weeks ago showing where things are at. You can see the nice graveled entryway here, and there's a nice landing pad. This building here has been around, it's been on site since about 2013, I think. That houses the 18-inch Barry Arnold Memorial Telescope. That's what's inside there. So we just a few weeks ago, we put in a nice landing pad, concrete pad, where that can sit on top of the gravel. So that's where things are at with the observatory right now. You can see the visitor center here. To get to this state, it's been about 3,000 hours of volunteer work by the committee on the dome and observatory. On top of that, Roman has probably spent about 2,000 hours on working on the telescope. So a lot of time has gone into this project to get us to where we are, but we've really progressed really well. The committee's worked really hard and worked really well together. And I think we've got an amazing facility just about ready. So in terms of timelines moving forward, we had hoped, of course, this year at Northern Prairie Star Party to have the grand opening. But COVID-19, as you can imagine, has really thrown a wrench in the works there. In fact, Northern Prairie Star Party, as many of you know, has been postponed for a year. There is no Northern Prairie Star Party this year. The observatory itself is nearly done. There's only a few more trips out to get it ready to put the scope in, and then there'll be some additional work once the scope gets put in. But the observatory is on track. The telescope construction, Roman's still working on that, and he's hoping sometime this winter or maybe next spring to have it ready to drop into the observatory, and then we'll have some finishing tasks out of the observatory to accommodate the telescope. So that's where things are at. I wanted to show, I know I've got a number of people that are quite geeky in this hobby, would like to see maybe some of the technical aspects of the observatory. So let me see if I can bring up a different screen. This one here. All right, so this is a CAD drawing of the observatory and its telescope. So you can see the, what's interesting is when you look at the observatory from the outside, you can't see what's underneath. And what's underneath is, you can see that the telescope pier there, cylindrical pier, which the telescope bolts on the top of, but underneath that is then a rectangular block right there of concrete, which the concrete pier sits on. And those two pieces, the rectangular block and the cylindrical pier, weigh about 7 tons, and that's what the telescope bolts onto. So it's a very solid pier for the telescope, which is of course isolated from the floors, et cetera, in the building. And then what supports those, it turns out Black Nugget Lake Observatory sits on basically overburden from an old coal mine. And that ground has been sitting there for, and I think the mine closed in the 60s. So the ground's been sitting there for a long time, but it's really a very poor stability soil. And so we had to put in, it turns out, these screw piles are called, helical piles. I didn't draw the helixes, I just left them up. But basically they're steel pipes. These are 3.5-inch diameter steel pipes with a helix that I haven't shown that allows them to get drawn into the ground, screwed into the ground. And they go down, the tips here, they're 20 feet, 5 feet long, these screw piles. And their tops are a few feet underground. So the tips, the bottoms here are probably about almost 30 feet below ground. That's where the screw piles go to. And that supports that massive telescope pier. You can see the concrete grade beam above here, the octagon, and that's supported by a set of screw piles. These screw piles here support the concrete grade beam. They don't have to be as deep, of course, because that doesn't weigh as much and it doesn't need as much stability. And then you can see, of course, the dome, which was donated by the University of Alberta. It's a 14-foot dome. And that had some interesting considerations were needed to use that dome. So this dome was donated, like I said, by the University of Alberta. It's a 14-foot dome. And let me now show you the telescope that's sitting inside there. So let me get rid of some of this stuff. Probably the base too. Yeah, that's good. So this is the telescope you can see here that sits inside the observatory. You can see the 32-inch mirror at the bottom. That's the Bob Drew mirror that was donated, made by Barry Arnold, F4 mirror. So if you have a 32-inch mirror F4, you can do the math. It's pretty easy, right? 4 times 32. That's how long. That's not like 10 feet, more than 10 feet. You need the tube, but the optical tube length would be about 10 feet. And that, of course, has to rotate around, and so you need, like, a 20-foot dome. Our dome's 14 feet, so to fit this scope into a 14-foot dome, what the Black Nugget Lake Observatory came up with Roman's design here, was to use a folded Newtonian design. And so there's actually then a flat mirror at the top here. So this is the flat mirror, very high-quality flat mirror, which then sends the light down to the diagonal, and then, of course, out through the eyepiece there hole. So that's what's called the folded Newtonian design, and it allows us to fit this massive telescope into this 14-foot dome. The other huge advantage of this design is when you're observing near the zenith, you don't have to climb some, I don't know, whatever, 8-foot tall or taller, whatever, step ladder, stand 6 feet up a step ladder. Instead, because it's folded, the eyepiece here, in fact, when this thing is down at, not at zenith, I can probably look through it myself. I'm a fairly tall person. I probably don't need a ladder for many of the altitudes on this eyepiece. At the zenith, I'll probably have to stand on maybe 1 or 2 steps on a short little stool. But for public viewing and for naive viewers, we don't really want to send them up a giant stepladder and have them, 6 feet up a stepladder. So for that purpose, this folded design is really awesome. It does introduce an extra optical surface. which of course reduces your strail ratio a little bit, but the strail ratio on this scope is still really excellent. These are all really top quality, top-notch mirrors, and the strail ratio is still better than most, well, than any commercial Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope that many of us, of course, have. So still very high quality mirror. So let me go back then to the PowerPoint. Right. So, which brings me then to when this thing does open, hopefully next year. So barring any unforeseen circumstances like, I don't know, what can you have besides a pandemic? I don't even want to think about that. Nuclear war? I don't know. But barring any unforeseen circumstances that we haven't thought about, the operation of this scope should begin next year sometime. And once we are in the kinks out, then we're going to be wanting to run events with the telescope, both for RASC members and potentially also once we know what we're doing. And once we figured out how to deal with COVID, we'll be running public events as well for the public to look through this telescope. But we're going to, of course, need people on site to help with those kind of events. And so for that, we're going to be looking next year for volunteers. So when you start thinking about volunteering, keep in mind, maybe next year, considering helping out at Black Nugget Lake Observatory. So to help out at Black Nugget Lake, there are 4 operator levels, we call them. So the Black Nugget Lake Observatory committee has come up with these operator levels. The details are given on the members area site here. I've listed the website location. So you can go there to read about these levels. But I wanted to cover briefly level 1 because that's where you have to start. So you work your way up the level. You start at level 1, then you move to level 2, etc. So level 1 operator is where you start. You have to be a member of the RASC Edmonton Center, obviously. You have to request authorization from the Black Nugget Lake Observatory Committee. You have to volunteer at a minimum of 1 Black Nugget Lake Observatory event annually in support of the rest of the operators. But what you get out of this then is you're able to come out to Black Nugget Lake and open the north gate. There's a locked gate to get into the site, and there's an observing area. And as a level 1 operator, you're allowed to come out and use that, open that north gate on your own and enter the site and use the observing site following the Black Nugget Lake Observatory access policy and procedures, which are given at the members area site. And of course, you have to follow the rules, obviously, of the site. So once you've been on a level 1 operator for 6 months, though, then you're authorized to become a level 2 operator. And the level 2 operators then are the ones who can actually start to operate the telescope if they're under the direct supervision of a level 3 or 4 operator. As Phil mentioned with the robotic telescope, we don't want people running this thing into the wall or whatever, or pointing it at the sun, etc. So level 2 operators would be under the direct supervision at all times of a level 3 or 4 operator. But so keep that in mind for next year. Once the scope is operating, think about coming out and becoming a level 1 operator and helping out. I would like to say that this project has been a huge effort from a lot of people, particularly the Black Nugget Lake Observatory Committee. So this committee here has put in a horrendous amount of hours. Like I said, I think we've kind of lost track after about 3,000 hours. Many of us stopped counting, but I know we've got at least 3,000 hours from this committee alone on the observatory, and then Roman himself has probably put a couple of thousand additional hours on building the telescope. So lots of time spent on the project by the committee, and then help with many aspects of the project. A number of additional volunteers have come out and helped on site, as I've listed here. And then we've had a number of donations and in-kind contributions from a lot of different companies and individuals that we could not have done this project without. So I would like to finish there. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Warren. That was really interesting. We got a question. Will the purple jumpsuits be standard issued telescope operator apparel?
Sorry, we don't have a budget for outfits. You could buy your own. That's what the committee has done with the blue jackets, as they call them, that we have. Those were purchased by us ourselves. So, but you can certainly buy a purple jumpsuit, and you could wear it if you want.
Okay, Jay, you got your answer. Are there any other questions? Okay, I guess not. Well, thanks very much, Warren.
You bet.
Okay, speaking of the Black Nugget Lake Observatory, as you all know, the our Northern Prairie Star Party was canceled because of COVID-19. Now, as in past years, we always booked well in advance sites for our people to camp during the Star Party on the Friday and Saturday night. After the provincial regulations of cutting campsites in half, we were left with 9 campsites that we still have booked. And we kicked the idea around in council as what are we going to do with these 9 sites? Should we just cancel them? And then it was suggested maybe we should offer them up to the membership. You know, you're still going to have to pay for them. You have to pay the center back, but with half the campsites in the province disappearing, they would seem to be a fairly reasonable or very desirable item to have. So we decided we would have a raffle, and I sent a memo to all our members about 10 days ago asking if anyone was interested to put their name in a raffle. I would draw them out of this hermetically sealed container. And the winners would get the sites. Now, there are 9 sites. 2 of them are powered. 7 of them are not powered. We only had 7 entries, so everyone's a winner. It'll be, I'm going to draw them in name, award them in order of the numbers of the sites, and sites number 91 and 92 are the powered sites, and they're the first sites that we have. Now, if you are one of the first 2 people I draw and you don't want powered site, you can horse trade with the others. I'm going to send a memo out to everyone on the list who sent in their names with all the arrangements and when we want the money and all that. And if you want to negotiate the you know, different sites, it'll be up to you. So here we go. I'm holding this up. I can't see. So the first name drawn is Warren Finley.
Yay!
Okay, so I'm going to write down Warren. Okay, that's site 91. Site number 92 is David Fielder. And that is the other powered site. All the rest of them are unpowered. Okay. So the first unpowered site, site number 93, goes to Ian Doctor. Okay. Site number 95, Marion Hobbs. Site number 98, John and Secrete. Okay. Oh, there's a wrapper from the chocolate in there. Site number 100. Stephen, I don't know how to say this, Peltier, something. And the last one is Murray Paulson for site number 102. So we still have 2 sites left. If anyone is interested, I guess you can contact me and be first come, first serve. If they're still kicking around by the August deadline, we'll just give them up, and I'm sure that the campsite will make good use of them. Okay, Abdur, you ready to go? You're muted.
Okay, yes,
There
I
you
am now.
go. Okay.
Okay. Just gonna pull that up here. Okay, I'm just gonna share my screen now.
Is it light baffled? Oh, it is. Good.
Okay, yeah. Okay, can everyone see that? Looking good? Okay. Okay, awesome. So welcome to Astroimaging Corner number 102, everybody. Oh, there's a message here. Oh, no, we're good. Okay. So the first image today is of the Eagle Nebula. Was sent in by Rick Bram. And Rick had taken this in New Mexico in February 2020. And this was taken with the Celestron Edge HD 11 on a Celestron CGX mount. And Rick was using the Canon EOS RA full frame mirrorless camera. This is a combination of 120-second subs at ISO 6400, and Rick processed this in Adobe Photoshop CC. And this is a large star-forming region, and this is also the subject of the famous Hubble Space Telescope image titled "The Pillars of Creation." This next, oh, sorry. Okay, this next image is also sent in by Rick. This is Messier 87. The interesting thing about this particular image is that if you look closely right over here, you can see this line, this streak of light coming out of the center of the galaxy. And this is actually a jet of gas being shot outwards at half the speed of light by the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. This was also taken by Rick in New Mexico in February 2020 with the Canon EOS RA and the Edge HD 11-inch on the CGX mount. And the next image is of the Orion Nebula complex from Rick. And you can see the Orion Nebula down here. Oh, sorry. Okay, you can see the Orion Nebula, and you've got the Horsehead Nebula over here, and you've got the giant loop of gas around the Horsehead Nebula and Orion. And this one was with a Canon EF 135mm f2 lens on a Celestron CGX mount. And this was a combination of 40-second subs at ISO 6400 with the Canon EOS RA. Our next entry is from Alistair Ling, and this is, oh, actually wrong title over there. This is the moon rising over downtown Edmonton. And Alistair took this with a Canon 5D Mark III and a 70mm lens. And this is a time lapse sent in by Alistair with the same 5D Mark III. I don't believe I can play it like that, so I'm just going to play the time lapse over here if you can see my screen. Okay. Perfect. And then this is a shot also sent in by Alistair. This is a combination of 3 frames with a 70mm lens on the 5D Mark III. And actually 4 shots. And the shots were stitched together in a program called Hugin. And this one was sent in by Alistair. This is, oh, we have, oh yes, those particular NLCs, I'll have to get the date from Alistair. I believe they might have been maybe June 3rd or 4th, but I can check with Alistair afterwards. Okay, and then this one was shot by Alistair with a 150mm lens on the Canon 5D Mark III, and this is the moonrise on June 4th. You can see the moon coming up between the buildings in downtown Edmonton. Okay, our next image was sent in by Arnold, and this is Comet Pan-STARRS C2017 T2. And this was taken on the night of May 23rd or 24th. And this was with the Celestron RASA at f2 with an ASI 294 MC camera. And I believe this was a total of about 12 minutes of exposures. And you can see Messier 81 and 82 over here. That's the Cigar Galaxy and Bode's Nebula. And you can see Comet Pan-STARRS right down here. And this next shot was one of mine. I was testing out the new ASI 1600 camera that I just gotten from the balcony. So I was testing out a shot of the moon with the ZWO red filter. And this was at 800 millimeters with an 8-inch reflector. And this was a total of 120 frames stacked in AS3 and processed in Registacks. This next one was sent in by Tom Owen. This is the Wizard Nebula in GC 7380. And the star cluster embedded in the blue part of the nebula was discovered by Caroline Herschel. And this was Tom's first foray into all narrowband imaging with an S2 hydrogen alpha and an O3 filter. Tom was using a set of Astrodan filters with the QSI 683 mono CCD camera, and the scope was a TAC FS102 at f8. And the total exposure time for this was an impressive 5 hours, consisting of 25-minute subs with each filter. And Tom stacked this in Deep Sky Stacker and processed it in Star Tools using the Hubble color palette. This next shot is from Tom as well. This is the Pickering's triangle, or the Western Veil. And these are remnants of a supernova explosion. And this object is 1,470 light years distant in the constellation of Cygnus. Tom is using his QSI 683 mono CCD camera with an 80 millimeter triplet refractor for this one. And the total exposure time was 2 hours, consisting of 6-minute hydrogen alpha subs and 8-minute RGB subs with each of the filters. And the next image is Comet Pan-STARRS, and this is from the same night when Arnold and I were also out there doing some imaging. This was with the Celestron Edge HD at f2. And this was with the ASI 294 MC Pro camera as well. And this is a total of 2 hours of integration time. And Mike processed this in Deep Sky Stacker as well. And you can see Bode's Nebula, Messier 81 right here, the Cigar Galaxy, Messier 82, and then you've got Comet Pan-STARRS C2017 T2. And next, we have an image from Josephine, and this is Markarian's chain. Josephine was using her White Cat 250 millimeter refractor with a Nikon D5300 at f5 and ISO 2500. And this is a combination of 45 1-minute exposures from Blackfoot. And this was processed in Cyril and Star Tools with Alistair's help. Okay, and I want to congratulate Alistair Ling for receiving the Astroimaging certificate in wide field imaging. And he joins fellow Edmonton Center members, Murray Paulson, Luca, Ian, and Tom. Basically the wide field contest is aimed at beginners. You can just use a camera or a tripod. And, Alistair says that most of the people already meet most of the requirements. They just need to put it together and submit the images. And basically, you can submit your shots on rasc.ca. And these are a couple of sample images over here. These are, from James Edgar, star trails, aurora, phases of the moon, Venus, sunrise, sunset. Basically, get your images together and submit them on rasc.ca. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed all the submissions, and thank you to everyone who submitted images this time. Okay, back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Abdur. That's great. We got a question here. Oh, thanks, Abdur. Okay. And I thought I saw something about it was there, but now it's gone. Something about Tom was saying something about some sort of deep
Yeah,
sky
just
imaging.
to clarify, Tom's certificate is in the deep sky imaging category, not the wide field. And Murray has all three certificates, the wide field, the deep sky, and the solar system ones. So,
Nice. Thank you for clarifying.
so, you know, just to reemphasize, a lot of those targets you probably already have sitting on your hard drive somewhere. Or even I scanned a couple of slides from way back when using film. So, yeah, please submit your portfolio.
Yeah, I know every time I post something that is part of that on Astro, Luca says, you can get a certificate for this. So maybe I should get off my butt and send them in. Okay. Let's see here. What do we got? Okay. I guess I should share the screen here. Okay, looks like we're right at the end here. So, as I wrote in the June Stardust, the term of the current council concludes at the end of the year. So over the summer, I'm going to be approaching elected and appointed members to see if they want to carry on for another 2-year term. And I would encourage others who are not part of council but may wish to participate on council to consider that and let me know. We're always looking for fresh faces, fresh ideas. I'm not getting any younger, and neither are most of the council. There's a lot of gray hair, and we want to keep this going. Been around for over 150 years. Our center's been here since 1932. You know, let's keep it going. I put a spending proposal in the Stardust that we will be voting on in September. Have a look at that. Speaking of spending, our budget is in remarkably good shape because most of what we allocate money for is for outreach, and we haven't been doing any because of COVID, which is a good thing because our next casino would have come up in early next year, but there are no casinos, so our next opportunity to get additional funds will probably not be until later on in 2021. As we're now in perpetual twilight, I'm looking forward to seeing more NLC reports, and I imagine I'll be seeing lots of photos on Astro. I can't
Jeff,
say what, yes?
Sorry, just on that note of noctilucent clouds, there have been more sightings of late, last night, this morning. And for those of you who would like to go out, it's you're shorting your sleep, but it's a nice thing to see. Generally, don't expect to really see anything before 11:30 p.m. And then things sort of get better for the next hour or so. And then likewise, by the time you hit 4 a.m., it's completely way too bright. So you can actually get to bed again and get another couple of hours sleep. So get out there and have a look. Binoculars are fantastic for looking at NLC.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. I can't say what we're going to be doing in September. As I said last month, we were working with RASC Calgary to bring in a speaker for both of our meetings. Our meeting on Monday and theirs on the Thursday of that week, but that's been postponed. So I can't say if we're going to be in the Ziedler Dome or online. I can say whatever may come. I'll keep you advised. So have a good summer. We'll see you in September. I'm going to do some light editing on this. This has been recorded, and I will post it on our website. Oh, I see some chat. Let's see here. Let's see what we got. Casinos can do curbside pickup. Okay. Just hand your money out of the window as you come into the curb. Okay. Oh, I wanted to. Okay. Last night NLCs were great. That's Alan from Alan Dyer. Last night NLCs were great. 11:15. Okay. All right, so other than that, I wanted to go out with a song. We'll see if this works. Let's see here. Oops, oh, darn it. Okay, let's see if this is going to work here.
Night, while you're away, don't forget to write. Bye bye, so long, farewell. Bye bye, so long. See you in September. See you when the summer's through. Here we are, saying goodbye at the station. Summer vacation is taking you away. Have a good time, but remember there is danger in the summer moon above. Will I see you in September, or lose you to a summer
And I'll just fade that out and say goodnight. Okay. Thanks, Phil. That was great.
Thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Abdur. Thanks, everybody. We'll be talking, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Good night.